Thanks so much. And I also want to thank the organizers for thinking to include me in the program today. It's a really exciting program that's been put together. I'm really looking forward to the discussion that's going to ensue. I thought I would start with just a reflection on why the bio is important in bio cybersecurity. And I think about it in the context of a term, the bioeconomy, which is economic activity that's driven by research and innovation in the life sciences and biotechnology, typically and often enabled by technological advances in engineering, computing, and information science. And I think we can all agree that it's very important and it's growing in importance. It has products including medicines and medical diagnostics to foods and materials. And I think we're all surrounded by and benefit from these biotech-based products, perhaps over the last 18 months more than at any other recent time for our country. And the recent convergence of advances in high throughput technologies for data collection and big data analytics, engineering, robotics, these are just accelerating the development and growth of the bioeconomy faster than ever before. And from a kind of value perspective, a lot of people believe that the bioeconomy is probably 5 to 10% of GDP, meaning it's roughly $1 to $2 trillion. And I think it's fair to say, and thinking about that word cloud that you showed, that there's consensus that the US is a leader in this space and has been a leader in this space, but the competition is growing stronger from a lot of countries around the world. Certainly China, but I would also, it's a global competition with our friends and allies in the UK, Switzerland, and many others. And because of the importance of the bioeconomy and because of its important role in our prosperity and security, and because of the increasing competition, I think it's critical that all scientists and educators actively upgrade our thinking as it relates to cyber-related risks. There's cyber risks in all kinds of industries. And I would argue, but I'm a bio-based person, that the implications are even more significant in our field. So I'm going to make a couple of quick comments about cyber risks generally, and then maybe a little bit more on the biopharma industry before passing the baton back. And I think there's a lot of best practices that we all should be following related to, I'll call it cyber hygiene. There's also best practices that organizations follow to ensure they have a modern and appropriate infrastructure for data and data storage. And there's a lot of value in organizations that promote information sharing about threats and risks. And all of our IT departments and organizations were, I think, all active in that space. And I think the more we do in that space, the better it is for our entire community. But as an academic, and with my academic hat on, I would say the one area that we all need to do a better job is that I think we understate the importance of education and workforce development as it relates to cyber risks and mitigations. And I think we can do a lot more. And I'm so happy to see the efforts at CSU that are ongoing in this space. I think that's really leading, and we need more of that. So let me think for a moment with you about how risks and failures in the cyberspace might impact you as a bio researcher, even beyond just kind of clicking a malicious link in an email phishing attack. When I think about this, I think about a simple reaction to cyber threats as, okay, let's lock down the computers, let's lock down the infrastructure. Lots of organizations do that, but let's think about what that might mean, take it a step further, if we start to lock down the infrastructures that are used to share information. Now, we could even take that a step further and say, what if we start limiting the sharing of information as a way to mitigate risks? Can you imagine a world without PubMed for finding articles, or without GenBank for sequences, or many of the other, for example, NCBI related resources? Think about how much slower the pace of research would be without them. On the other hand, have you ever thought about that gene sequence or that protein sequence that perhaps the student has pulled in order to do some cloning, and ask the question, how do I know it is correct and that sequence has not been modified or tampered with somehow? And what about the tools that people are downloading to analyze DNA sequences or to interface with those NCBI sequencing resources? I don't know if students and faculty and researchers wonder to themselves, I wonder if those connections are secured connections between the computer, whatever cloud-based software as a service is available, and the sequence databases. And how do you know if everyone else's connections are secure? And how would you even know if the sequence for insulin or some other antibody had been changed in a database 5 years ago? Would you know? And perhaps maybe that explains why some of my grad students don't get the cloning to work the first time. But it is also a global research community, and we have to, on the one hand, recognize that global competition, but we also have to understand the value of open sharing and equal access to information to benefit everybody. And I think that balance of the importance of sharing of scientific knowledge, which is essential to advanced science and knowledge globally, has to be balanced against doing it in a secure manner in which everyone has symmetric access to scientific data and discoveries, and we avoid, to the extent possible, certain asymmetries that can happen as nations compete. So I'm going to just close with thinking about what these issues are as it relates to the biopharma industry, which is a space that I spend a lot of time in. And here I'm talking about companies that produce therapeutic proteins, antibodies, vaccines, including the mRNA and nanoviral vector-based vaccines against SARS-CoV-2. It's certainly clear in that space that digital-related threats can have a significant impact in biomanufacturing. It is seen with malicious computer worms, NotPetya, that took down Merck's manufacturing processes globally in 2017, resulting in more than $1 billion in damages to Merck. That resulted in shortages of Gardasil vaccine and may have contributed to stockouts of hepatitis B vaccine. Those are the very visible incidents that happen in the news, but there's other cyber-related impacts that can be more subtle. There's a lot of variation in biological systems that are used to manufacture therapeutic proteins and antibodies, and there's a lot of risks to product consistency. It's a very highly regulated industry, so there's a lot of controls in place and quality testing to mitigate those risks for biotherapeutics to ensure consistent production. But nevertheless, there's always going to be some potential for some level of unexpected, even natural genetic drift in biological systems, or on the other hand, a malicious introduction of some information that could be difficult to predict, detect, and mitigate. And these are the kinds of threats we need to think about. Another area of potential concern is the security of genetic information. I kind of alluded to this earlier at the cyber bio interface. There's been some reports in the past about security of DNA synthesizers and sequencers, which are used. And of course, that information is critical when thinking about transfecting cell lines and thinking about how DNA information is stored and what that means. And then finally, some of the paradigms for biomanufacturing are changing. There's movement towards continuous on-demand manufacturing, where there's increasing reliance on data in real time to make decisions about how to control that process. If cyber-related threats aren't mitigated there, you could have a scenario where the control of manufacturing is substantially influenced in a way that's unanticipated. And in the newest forms of medicine, gene therapies, cell therapies, which are truly personalized treatments. You manufacture one lot of medicine sometimes to treat one patient. And in the case of pediatric cancers, that is the difference often between life and death for that patient. And in those cases, some of those products are actually infused into the patient with the goal of correcting and modifying the genetic sequence of cells that are inside the patient. How do you mitigate threats and risks to obviously derive the benefit of those life-saving medicines and ensure to the maximum extent possible that there aren't digital associated risks? So I would argue cybersecurity and biocybersecurity related failures in biomanufacturing can have a huge impact on the supply of medicine, on patient health. We really need to pay attention to that, not only from the public health perspective, but from an economic perspective in terms of the economic losses to the industry, to manufacturing processes, as well as our ability to respond rapidly to emergent public health threats. So with that, I'll finish my remarks. I appreciate everyone's time. Looking forward to the comments from others as well as the discussion. Thanks.